Yesterday, I had a person call me and say, why don't you deputize citizens who have guns to come out and patrol the city of Kenosha? And I'm like, oh, hell no. And what happened last night, and I think Chief Miskinis is going to talk about it, was probably the perfect reason why I wouldn't. Once I deputize somebody, they fall under the Constitution of the state of Wisconsin. They fall under the county of Kenosha. They fall under my guidance. They have to follow my policies. They have to follow my supervisors. They are a liability to me and the county and the state of Wisconsin. I don't know this for sure, but the incident that happened last night where 2 people lost their lives, I think they were part of this group that wanted me to deputize them. As a part of the county of Kenosha, that would have been, in reality, 2 deputy sheriffs who killed 2 people. It would have been one deputy sheriff who killed 2 people. Sorry about that. And the liability that goes with that would have been immense. So that's one of the things that was brought up to me, and I said, there's no way.
All right, welcome back to Law and Crime Report. My name is Bob Bianchi. I'll be hosting the show today. We have some tremendously talented guests on the plate. Julie Rendelman, former homicide prosecutor, district attorney, a criminal defense attorney right now in state and federal court, and a host at the Law and Crime Network. Welcome to the show, Julie.
Thanks for having me.
And Bernarda Villalon, she is in her own right a great trial attorney with great homicide experience, a criminal law expert, as well as a legal analyst. Bernarda, welcome.
Hi, Bob. Thanks for having me. Hey, Julie.
Hey, Bernarda.
Hey, guys. Listen, we got a lot to talk about in this, and don't be afraid to ask each other questions, actually, if you have them based on what somebody else is saying. I want to see if we can get a free-flowing dialogue here, because let's start with part 1. Deputizing people. Guys, what is happening out here? I mean, from a law enforcement perspective, we've all been in law enforcement. This is such a dangerous concept, and the proof is in the pudding right here, where Kyle Rittenhouse, who is 17 years old, is now being charged for a double homicide and injuring another person. Julie, what's up?
I think anytime you put a loaded gun in anyone's hand who isn't trained, let alone a 17-year-old young man, this is what's going to inevitably happen. I always question when it comes to these cases, like, who is running the show in these jurisdictions. I've seen a lot of information about this police chief. I don't know if you've seen a video I happened to watch about him, where he made, as far as I'm concerned, incredibly racist comments in the past regarding his views of those people that he is supposed to be showing law enforcement for. So I question who the real leadership is, certainly in Kenosha.
In Bernarda, we're dealing with an idea of police reform where officers are, in fact, trained. There are policies and procedures, and we see so much needs to be done in order to make it better. I mean, this has been building and building for a couple of years now with these fringe groups that now believe, as this 17-year-old did, that it is his obligation. And we found this out from social media. He is a police buff. He is a Blue Lives Matter person. And he felt it upon himself and others as well in the group that he was with to go down there and to quote unquote, protect businesses in order to support the police. Tell me in your mind about how dangerous this can become. It's almost, to me, close to anarchy.
Bob, this is so despicable on so many different levels. It's a shame that we have a 17-year-old young man, a boy, armed with a rifle, walking through the streets of Wisconsin, not even just Wisconsin, but coming from Illinois, armed with a rifle that pretty much is almost the size of his body, and then decided to take it upon himself to go through a peaceful protest, armed with that rifle, and start pointing it at people that are exercising their First Amendment right to peacefully assemble and speak, and then decide to just start shooting people, taking away their lives and their pride just because they're exercising their First Amendment right. And this 17-year-old man who actually just walked down these streets, he's looked at by officers that don't stop him at any point. In fact, there's video of him getting a bottle of water from an officer who doesn't stop and say, hey, what are you doing with a rifle? What are you doing with a gun? You're just a kid. Do you have a license for that? Why are you going to a protest with that type of weapon? At no point he is stopped. So many different levels, this is just wrong. And there's culpability on so many different sides of this.
Yeah, well put. Julie, to Bernarda's point, there's a lot of social media that we already have with him. Again, he was in these like little junior academies to be a police officer and emergency services work. He's a buff, as we call it, right? He wants to be in that world. And he actually has this assault style firearm. I don't know what they're called specifically, but they're ominous looking, at a medic kit. And he's actually on Twitter talking about how he's going to go down there and basically save the world. And to Bernarda's point, he was violating the 8 p.m. curfew they had. And by the way, a 17-year-old is not allowed to carry a firearm in public. And again, to Bernarda's point, and I'm going to quote, as these officers were throwing water to this group of people that he was included in, the officers were alleged to have said, "We appreciate you guys. We really do." Man, oh man, what a horrible message to be throwing to a group of random people who are in possession of firearms, basically supporting what it is they're doing, Julie.
Yeah, I think one of the problems when we talk about, we talk all the time about police reform, and one of the things we talk about is better training of police officers in terms of how they deal with the community, but specifically better training with police officers how they deal with their own weapons. And so it's bad enough when we have police officers that aren't properly trained when it comes to the use of a weapon. Now we pull in individuals that have no basis, no experience whatsoever in any way, shape, or form. And by the way, don't necessarily think they need to follow the rules of anybody out there taking control of a situation. And this is what's bound to happen.
Yeah, and so to those that are out there that believe that deputizing citizens to assist the police is a good thing, I think this is a perfect example of why it's not. Anyway, let's get into a little law here. He fled the state to his home state of Illinois after the attack. He is now under arrest. Can you guys, Julie, I'll start with you, to tell our audience a little bit about how the extradition process works?
So, I mean, we're in strange times because we're dealing with a pandemic, so that may slow things down quite a bit. But usually when an individual is wanted from another state, they will be picked up in whatever state they're in. And the state that wants him, Wisconsin or whatever it is, will basically serve papers on the state he's in to indicate that they want him brought back. He can waive extradition, which means that he won't make an issue and he'll agree to come back, in which time law enforcement will physically bring him back to the state and he will face charges there. He can fight extradition, although I think it's an uphill battle in most cases, at which time he would get a hearing that would basically make a determination as to whether or not they are allowed to take him back. But I think in this case, we're going to see him coming back fairly quickly and facing charges in the state, in the county of Kenosha.
Yeah, I agree. As a prosecutor, you would have to file a governor's warrant, they call it, and that governor's warrant, if there's going to be an objection, extradition goes down, the defendant is identified, a hearing is held, and the court makes a decision as to whether or not that other state can take them back to where the crime was alleged to have committed. Bernarda, we have another issue here. He's a 17-year-old. Now, I don't know the laws of that state, but typically speaking, that would be a juvenile court matter in most places. But as you know, you can waive matters up to the adult court if you see fit as a prosecutor under the standards of that state law. What are your thoughts about that and whether as a prosecutor they're going to be making a move to try him as an adult?
Well, definitely, I see the prosecution moving to try him as an adult. Even though he is 17 years old and normally anyone under the age of 18 is considered a juvenile, because he committed the horrendous act of taking the life of the individual and he's going to be charged with intentional homicide, the prosecution would be moving to charge him as an adult, and he will be facing life imprisonment for 2 counts of intentional homicide, as well as for the battery of the other individual who's been seriously injured. So definitely he's going to be moved to be charged as an adult. I will be curious to see whether there will be any federal charges in this case as well, since he did come from a different state to cause harm in Wisconsin, and see if there's any civil rights violations to see if he was targeting actually those Black protesters out there.
Yeah, that's a great point, Julie. To what Bernardo is saying is that the civil rights violations are something that are significant, as well as the interstate travel So it'll be interesting to see if the feds get involved, because that could add pressure. But going back to this vigilante style group, why do I feel, Julie? What are your thoughts on this? Given the climate that's out there, the two sides clashing,
Sure.
right-wing militia kind of people, and those who are protesting, and some of those who are rioting as well, that somehow Mr. Kyle Rittenhouse in some segments of society is going to be hailed as a hero. Why do I feel that that's next?
Because it is next, and I do want to step back and put on the defense attorney hat for 1 second. Before we rush to judgment, I think it's very easy for us all to rush to judgment. We don't know all the facts. We obviously see facts that do not help Mr. Rittenhouse, but we don't know the facts surrounding the exact moment where the shots were fired, at least in the initial incident. And so I do want to try to be objective and step back for 1 second and say there may be a defense. I don't know what that defense is, whether it be some type of justification defense, but I want to just step back and make sure that we all recognize that we don't know all the evidence. It hasn't come in, and I don't want to jump to conclusions. I think the conclusion we can jump to is that anytime you have a 17-year-old holding one of, as Bernarda described, a weapon that's bigger than his own body, trouble is going to happen. And so we know that for sure. But as to the specifics of this crime and whether they can prove it beyond a reasonable doubt, I do want to hold judgment until we know a little more.
Bernarda, I think that's an excellent point Julie raises. Of course, we don't have all the facts. And what concerns me is that in this environment, whereas prosecutors, we're always trying to just judge a case based on the law and the facts. We try not to cater to the court of public opinion or to politics as best as we can. But for the last couple of years, we have seen politics infused so greatly in some of the charges and cases. To Julie's point, there could be potentially a self-defense when she uses the word justification, for all we know.
Yeah, but what you know is that with politics applies pressure, and pressure to the prosecution to do something, to hold someone accountable for the taking of life. So with all the protests, all the pressure from the community, all the social media posts, all the social media requests and the petitions, all of this causes pressure on the prosecution to hold someone accountable. And at the very least, to take someone into custody and have them face charges. Ultimately, a jury will decide what the facts are and what this person should be held accountable for. And if he is in fact guilty when they see all the facts and evidence presented to them. But in the meantime, from what we know, accountability, this person, we know for sure, had an illegal firearm in his possession, and he went to that protest armed. And at the very least, he should be charged with gun possession.
Fair points. I would just to make sure our audience understands, as prosecutors, we have an ethical obligation only to bring a case to trial when we believe we have enough evidence to prove that case beyond a reasonable doubt. And while I agree with Bernarda completely with regard to the idea that it's great to have the public out there for reform to make sure the prosecutor does the right thing, I worry also that we may go down a slippery slope in some instances, maybe not all, that they're going to not think that it's the right thing to do, but do it anyway and say, let the jury call it so that the pressure's off of me. I'm just telling you, I've been around the block. We got to take a break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. My name is Bob Bianchi. Let's take a little bit of a turn here. So Fotis Dulos, you all know the case out there in Connecticut. Michelle Troconis, Fotis Dulos killed himself, so he's no longer a defendant, but Michelle Troconis is. The attorney for Ms. Troconis is actually producing information with respect to the interview that she gave on August 13th, 2019. Let's take a listen.
And then he walked and he grabbed me, he gave me a piece of paper over the toilet, paper towel, and I put it inside where I had the bag of cleaning, what I was cleaning, the house.
Okay, did you see spilled coffee?
No, I didn't see that.
Did you see a coffee cup?
No, because I didn't look inside the car.
Did the paper towel smell like coffee?
No, I didn't smell it.
Well, still, you're holding that coffee stinks.
But I hold the paper towel, but I didn't smell it, I didn't see that.
But even still, you didn't smell coffee?
No.
You know how coffee is when you smell it, it stinks.
Yeah.
Smell it.
Julie, I know that there's some allegation by the defense attorneys. A couple of things that they're saying is that the bail conditions should be loosened. I want you to kind of go over with our audience what the charges are with respect to the tampering and the conspiracy charges, what you think about the strength of this case is. And there's been some criticism of the police and the manner in which they questioned her. I hate to critique based on one single clip, but what do you think about the entire case against her right now?
So look, this case was Fotis Dulos. I think everyone agreed that before Fotis Dulos took his life, the case against him, at least circumstantially, was overwhelming in terms of his guilt. I think that, Michelle Troconis, obviously being the girlfriend of Fotis Dulos, and, there were certain pieces of evidence, including the fact that they knew that she had gone with him to the various locations to drop off some of the items, that there were statements she had made, to police that were very inconsistent. And then there was some DNA evidence as well that came together in terms of, the case against her. I've never felt that the case against her was exceedingly strong. It may be strong in terms of the tampering with evidence parts, because I think that is made out. But in terms of conspiracy for murder, I think there is some difficulties in being able to establish beyond a reasonable doubt that she is guilty. With that said, I don't believe, based on anything the defense attorney has provided in the past couple days, that anything is going to change the bail restrictions. One, I don't believe that the video we've seen indicates some type of over aggression on the part of the police. I mean, Bernarda and I have worked in Brooklyn for years. I've seen bad police tactics that have gone well beyond anything we just saw here. I think they're pretty gentle with her. So I'm not really seeing that. I'm also not seeing any indication other than a few Spanish words that she doesn't understand exactly what it is that they're saying to her. And then the second thing is that in terms of the allegations in the warrant as to whether or not she physically disposed of the items, I went through the warrant a few times. The warrant, I don't remember saying specifically that she disposed of the items, but that she was with him each time he disposed of the items. Mm-hmm. And at one point, she puts her hand out of the vehicle. So I'm not sure he's going to get a lot of, playtime with that regarding the judge.
What do you think about that, Bernarda?
I completely agree with Julie on this. There has been no change in circumstances to require any change in the bail conditions. I do completely also agree that the strongest case against her is with the tampering of evidence, because we did see the vehicle when it pulls up to several trash cans that there is a passenger in the vehicle. And at one point, you actually see the passenger taking out her arm and leaning out of the vehicle. And each time that vehicle did stop, there were some items that were thrown in trash cans. And it's like, how many times do you have to stop to throw out whatever garbage you have in your car? So that goes to tend to show her guilt. But I do agree with Julie. In terms of the questioning by these officers, I think they were actually being gentle with her. The number of detectives being in the room may be a slight problem, but then again, you don't see them trying to put words in her mouth. You don't see them being aggressive with her. They're not screaming at her. They're not pointing at her. They're not threatening her with anything. In the end, when it comes to the statement, is whether she knowingly, intelligently, and voluntarily waived her Miranda rights and spoke to those detectives to give a statement.
Okay, well, there was actually surveillance clips of Dulos throwing away trash by the side of the road the day after his wife had gone missing, some of which you guys have alluded to, and we can see some of those clips right now on the screen. I'm just curious. I want to put this in relation, I know it sounds a little odd, Julie, to the Golden State Killer, right? 13 murders of a brutal, horrific nature. I have opined, whether it's agreed or not, that the prosecutors that took the death penalty off the table, pled him to a life without parole sentence in order to give the victims opportunities to be heard and things of that nature. This is a different kind of murder case. Is it possible prosecutors may say, look, we're willing to cooperate with you, either no jail time or very little jail time, but the victim's family wants to know what happened here. And if you have the information that can help us that way, it's valuable to us, so long as she wasn't an active participant. What do you think?
I'm betting that they've been asking that all along, and she is not willing to cooperate. My guess is this has been going on. Remember, they were trying to talk to her for months before Fotis Dulos died, and they still are nowhere nearer to finding Jennifer Dulos's body. Now, whether it means that she doesn't know where the body is, that is possible, or it is that she is sticking to her guns, no pun intended, and saying that she is not involved, and that simply being in the vehicle is simply her not knowing what he was doing, but just going, I hate to say going along for the ride. But yes, I think that there absolutely have been trying to get that information from her. And don't forget, there was a lawyer also that was arrested as well. And I'm confident they're doing the same thing with him.
Yeah, Bernarda, I love talking to you guys because you know so many of the nuances and the little crevices and crannies of how this works. It could very well be. It could very well be she has no information to provide. And how many times have we seen cases where the really, really bad person in a case has all this information to expose to law enforcement and gets this tremendous break. And those who did far less conduct wind up facing the music, as it were, and get a much more severe sentence. If you have nothing to give, you don't get that cooperation benefit. Could that be at play here?
It could be a play because I think if she had something to deal with to give to the prosecution, that she probably would have done it already just because she has so much time that she is facing in the end because they are trying to charge her, well, are charging her with a conspiracy to this homicide. So if she could have done anything to try to lessen her culpability and her time, I think she would have done it already, especially since we know that the main culprit now is dead, and that is the person that they were going after. So right now it's up to her. Like, are you going to give up the information or not? And if you don't have the information, she's not going to have much to be able to lessen her guilt or lessen her sentence in this type of case.
Okay, so let's go to a criminal reform, justice reform issue, Julie. It is this very kind of person. Let's assume hypothetically she doesn't have information to give, so she can't help herself out. And you can't give a factual basis in court and say that you're guilty of something that you didn't do. But if you go to trial on a case, you get the trial tax. I mean, this is what hurts people who roll the dice and go to trial. If you are found guilty, you're going to serve usually far more time than if you took a deal. But if you can't take a deal because you don't know about it, you're really between a rock and a hard place. How do you handle that as a defense lawyer?
I got to go back to Michelle Troconis, though. I don't think any of us can sit here and talk about how innocent she is. She may not be involved with the actual murder, but let's not make pretend that she has no idea what's happening when Fotis Dulos is getting out of the vehicle 15, 20 times to throw out items involved in this murder. And so I think it's naive for us to accept anything she says in terms of the coffee and not knowing this and that. I find it a bit incredulous. So it's hard for me to
I'm not suggesting and being naive in the question.
Oh, I don't think you're naive, Bob.
No, what I'm trying to say, though, is if the prosecutors move forward on the homicide charge and she knows nothing about that, but may have had something to do, or the conspiracy to commit homicide, or had something to do with maybe the disposal of human remains and or tampering with evidence, those are two substantially different crimes, Julie. She's probably maybe going to have to roll the dice on the homicide piece, or the prosecutors are going to have to make a decision to drop it and just go with the tampering if they don't have the evidence. Where is the evidence with regard to her involvement in the murder?
That's the part I think is a problem. I think we all agree that there are major issues. Now, there's circumstantial evidence that you can put together to establish some knowledge. I can't see, and I've yet to see, but again, we don't have all the information as to what actually links her directly to intentionally assisting in the actual crime. I've always found it was missing, but again, I might be missing something. So, maybe the prosecution knows something that we don't. Remember, the warrant says a lot, but it doesn't tell us everything.
Yes, I was about to say, Bernarda, that warrant was very extensively prepared. A lot of information was given to the public during the course of this. What are your thoughts about whether or not there is, in your estimation, a strong case with respect to the murder aspect of it?
Well, I have to agree with Julie, of course, that we don't know everything. We don't have all the facts. We don't have all the evidence because in the end, we are not the jurors in this case. We are not playing or trying this case in the media. They are holding close to the chest, to the vest, the information that they have, the evidence that they have, because in the end, they want to keep it where the jurors are the ones to decide her guilt on those charges. What we have so far, what we know, we don't have much information. And of course, because we don't have much information, we can say that there's a weak case in terms of the homicide charges. But then again, they have to have had the prosecution some kind of evidence to have been able to charge her and also hold her over for trial, because the charges still stand at this point. So obviously the fact finder preliminarily found that there was enough evidence to hold her over on these charges.
Okay, excellent points, guys. Just real quick, yes or no. Have you ever seen a circumstance where a prosecutor overcharged a case when there wasn't sufficient evidence? Julie?
I mean, Bernarda and I, of course. I mean, it's just no. I mean, we're going to agree again on this one, and if we don't, I'd be shocked.
Bernarda?
I plead the fifth.
All right, very
but
good.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah. You guys are awesome. I love having you two on the show. Thank you so much. Unfortunately, we got to take a real quick break, but we'll be back with more of Law and Crime on the other end. Stay with us so we can hear more of this great commentary. Thank you. Welcome back to Law and Crime Report. My name is Bob Bianchi. We're going to take this turn now to Breonna Taylor. If things could not get any stranger, the same police officers, it is found out, in 2018, conducted another botched raid with respect to another family that was terrorized. Let's take a look.
Bring her up! Stairway up. Police search warrant! I gotta let the door let. Got a stairway. Bang in, bang in. Police!
You know, Julie, I ran these tactical operations and was in the room when the tactical operations professionals would go over the plan and the execution of the plan. I mean, I am not a big fan of entering into people's homes, especially in the middle of the night. No knocking down a door, flash bangs going off, startling people. There's, to me, so many easier ways to secure the presence and to get the arrest without having to do that kind of stuff. Nevertheless, it is a tactic employed. But we were very, very certain to make sure that the people we were looking for were still living there, how the execution was going to take place, that we had the right house. It's as basic a thing as you can get, and we have the right targets. And this is the same team, many of the officers that were involved in the Breonna Taylor case. So I've got lots of problems with this. I can look at it from a policy point of view. I can look at it from an admissibility point of view, potentially at a trial, under some of the evidence rules there. But what I'm seeing is screaming out to me, bad practice, bad training, bad policies. How can lightning strike twice with something so serious?
Yeah, I am also interested how the judge signed the warrant, because it sounds like it sounds like they didn't conduct this until over 6 months later. And I can't fathom a judge thinking it's not stale at that point, that the information they have is about potentially, we're not clear if it's even these individuals that were living there at the time of the warrant, that are the people that are the potential focus of what the warrant should have been. Two, whether or not the drugs or the marijuana that they referred to that they had heard about 6 months before is even in the house 6 months later. The other issue that I think is, from what I'm understanding, and I could be wrong, is that this was not supposed to be a no-knock warrant. They took it upon themselves to make it a no-knock warrant. But my understanding of that warrant was that it was supposed to not be a no-knock warrant. So that's equally troubling. I think when you see the reaction of the individuals inside of the home, how terrifying, how absolutely terrifying it must have been. Keep in mind, there's no allegations of guns. There's no allegations of violence. There's no allegations that someone had committed a homicide a week before. The best you have is marijuana growing in a house, and this is their response.
Yeah, Bernarda, to Julie's point, she ticked them all off. I mean, you're talking about a low-level offense. Staleness, we could talk a little bit about that these things have to be close in time to the warrant being signed. You don't know whether those folks are still the same folks. You don't know whether the evidence is still there. And then the overwhelming amount of force that's being used against these folks who turn out not to have been responsible for anything is just mind-boggling to me. Thoughts?
It's uncalled for. It's completely uncalled for and dangerous. Just imagine this, Bob. You being in your home, inside the sanctity of your home, with your family, with your children, and all of a sudden somebody busts through your doors. A multiple amount of people bust through your doors and they're breaking your windows and they're just attacking and running into your house. You are scared. You are terrified. You don't know whether these are police officers. You're not even thinking that they're police officers, but that someone is coming to cause you harm. Executing these search warrants are so dangerous. I really don't understand. And I do not like the idea of the no-knock warrants. And this wasn't even supposed to be a no-knock warrant. In executing these warrants is uncalled for. And that is exactly what caused the death of Breonna Taylor, when you have people busting into your house without knocking, without announcing themselves, and you not knowing who they are. Is completely terrifying.
Well,
and I also have an issue with this warrant because in the search warrant affidavit, supposedly the police officer used as one of the reasons for the probable cause that there were packages being mailed there to a known drug suspect. The U.S. Postal Inspector already made a statement and said that no such packages were being sent to that location. So here it's very suspect, very shady, the grounds that they use for this warrant. And it's so similar to the grounds that they use for the warrant for the home of Breonna Taylor. Issues on all sides.
All great points, guys. And to that point that you just raised, Bernarda, if they come out that those officers have put stuff in there that contradicts what the postal inspectors told them in order to get that warrant, there is going to be a huge problem. We used to go to a judge and make sure everything was exact, I's dotted, T's crossed. We never wanted something like this to happen. But to your other point, yeah, you come barreling into my house like that and I don't know who you are, I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. I'm going to take defensive action. And so did Breonna Taylor's boyfriend, as he described the scenario that was unfolding, very similar to what you're saying. Let's take a listen.
So it's a loud boom at the door. First thing she said was, "Who is it?" No response. So we like, what the heck? We both get up, start putting on clothes. Another knock at the door. She's like, "Who is it?" Loud at the top of her lungs. No response. So I'm like, what the heck? So then I grab my gun, which is legal, like I'm licensed to carry everything. I've never even fired my gun outside of a range. I'm scared to death. So she says that there's another knock at the door. She's yelling at the top of her lungs, and I am too at this point. Who is it? No answer, no response, no anything. So we like, what the heck? We both just see what I have on. Grab the nearest thing. These aren't even mine. These are hers. So we both are just putting on something to go answer the door and see who's knocking at the door. It's late at night. So when we get out of the bed or whatever, like walking towards the door, the door comes off the hinges. So I just let off one shot. I still can't see who it is or anything. So now the door's flying open. I let off one shot, and then all of a sudden there's a whole lot of shots. And we both just dropped to the ground, and the gun fell right over there. And I kicked it because I'm scared to death. Now we're seeing lights and stuff. So it's looking like, okay, it's the police, and there's a lot of yelling and stuff. So there's just shooting, and we're both on the ground, and then when all the shots stop, I'm panicking. She's right there on the ground, bleeding, and yeah.
Breonna Taylor's boyfriend, Kenneth Walker, giving us a description. And guys, this is what we talked about before. I mean, they're screaming. Maybe they are saying, please. Look, I don't think those cops went in there with the idea that they wanted to shoot somebody, but it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy here. You go bombing into that place like that for a de minimis, minor offense. This resident doesn't know what's going on, thinks they're under attack. They fire around, and once the cops are fired at, the rest becomes history here. And then this 26-year-old young person is dead. Especially after the botched raid that we talked about in 2018, in some respects, and I know people don't like to hear this, I'm not exonerating what the police officers did, but they do what they're trained to do many times. And if they do something that's wrong in 2018 and aren't properly trained or disciplined, they may feel that they're doing the right thing. The bottom line here is there is a big problem within the culture of this agency as I see it. Julie?
Yeah, it's funny. I remember when when I was at the DA's office, we would write up warrants and we would sit down with the detective or the officer and go through every inch of every fact they knew. And I remember being so neurotic at getting anything wrong. I remember there was like big concern, and not only, you remember we have a lot of apartments in Brooklyn, so we would go, it would be fifth floor, 5A. How do you get there? And we would make sure, we would even have them take pictures of the front door to make sure that we were exactly right. We were concerned about how long ago the incidents were that could establish the probable cause, and so we took it incredibly seriously. And I can't imagine, after something like this happens in 2018, that every agency isn't doing everything humanly possible to make sure something like this doesn't happen again. Now, whether it be retraining of the officers, honestly, I think there's more than retraining, because the officers did not follow the directions of the original search warrant, which tells you something in regards to their desire to not follow the rules. I mean, we thankfully have it on tape, so we see what they did. And so the fact that it continued on, it shouldn't take the death of a woman for it to change. It should have been changed years ago. And it shouldn't take, by the way, 2018 for us videotaping something for it to have changed then. I'm sure it's been a problem long before that.
Yeah, and Bernarda, I think this goes to the point that you had raised earlier in a different segment about how the public outcry can really be a very powerful tool in instances like this, because the bottom line is, if 2018 occurs and then Breonna occurs, where does it end? When are they going to do something to ensure something like this doesn't happen? And to the point I think we've all raised throughout all this, we're not talking about like a homicidal maniac that they're looking after, or somebody who is a violent rapist. These are just minor offenses that this overwhelming force, not done properly, whether that's training or they're just not following the training, it's just so senseless.
It's, like I said, Bob, is completely uncalled for. It's just wrong on so many levels. It is botched. It is just, I can't fathom why this just keeps on happening so many times. And what I'm curious about to know is that, why is it during the execution of the search warrant for Breonna Taylor's home, why weren't there body cameras? In 2018, the body cameras were on for the execution of that warrant, but no body cameras were on for the execution of this warrant. In this warrant also, there was no mention of anyone being armed or dangerous. So the amount of violence, the amount of guns and individuals having to be present is just completely uncalled for, and it's not safe. Not safe for the officers and not safe for the people in that home, because you have to imagine, if someone's breaking into your home and you are armed with a firearm, obviously you're going to protect your home. That's exactly why we have those laws, that you can use a firearm when someone is entering your home or trying to commit a felony within your home, and you don't have to leave before discharging that firearm. And so how do we explain that here in cases like this?
Yeah, also add that our law has recognized and been enshrined from the day the Constitution of the United States was signed, and through every state, that the place you have the greatest protection from government intrusion is your home, in addition to your right to protect your home. And that's just a fact. Guys, thank you. Awesome commentary. We got to take a quick break, but we got more, so stay with us here on the Law and Crime Network. Welcome back to Law and Crime Report. My name is Bob Bianchi. We're going to take some entertainment / athletics cases next in our this coming block. I hate to say it. I got to do it. We're doing off camera. Oops, we're going to do it again. Yep, it's Britney Spears. She is back in the news again. You may recall in 2008, she had a public breakdown, as they called it. I'm being told she may have shaved her head, something with a bat. There were a lot of weird things that were going on. And her dad was her conservator for a significant period of time. But we've just learned from court documents that were revealed last week that the trustee of the estate now is her sister, Jamie Lynn Spears. Julie, we were talking about this off camera. I mean, 2008, she has not had control over her finances, and it's been a ping pong ball going back and forth with her. Do you have any insight as to how incapable Britney Spears is that they have to have these conservatorships and people monitoring her funds?
I don't have any insight in regards to, what's going on. What we were saying is, one would assume if you've needed one for this long, that the mental health issue is so prevalent that it impacts your ability to make the decisions when it comes to your finances. Now, keep in mind that, this is more of a familial thing. There have been outsiders as well. So they may all have agreed that even though she may not be in as bad a mental state than she was years ago, that it's still best to have someone overlooking her finances, particularly in an industry where she may be vulnerable to those people that, may want to take advantage of her. I do think it's interesting that her sister stepped in. I think from everything we read, the sister is the person that she trusts the most, that she feels the safest with. And I think the biggest issue is if something were to happen to Britney Spears, she wants her sister to be able to dictate how the finances are dealt with regards to her children.
Yeah, Bernarda, there could be some something to what Julie said there. As always, there is. She has been performing. She has gone out. I know in 2018 she may cancel their series and may not be doing it anymore. She was living somewhat of a normal life. It could just be that she isn't capable of, nor maybe does she want to be involved in the horror that happens when you have a lot of money for these people who are famous and have a lot of money, and people coming at you at all angles with fraud. And it's just easier to distance yourself so that everybody doesn't have to come to you asking you for something. What do you think?
I mean, that can be possible, but I think it's more of that she doesn't trust herself as much to actually handle her own affairs. Again, we don't know what kind of mental breakdown or what kind of medications that she can be on that caused her to have these breakdowns, and what is to happen if she's off those medications. So it's best for her to have someone else handle her affairs, and more importantly, that she trusts her sister to be able to handle her affairs. And in the case that she passes away, wants her sister to be able to take care of her kids. So this is probably what is best for her, for Britney, and is exactly what she wants.
Well, my only commentary on this, and it certainly isn't legal, that at least in Jersey, on the other side of the country, shaving your head and walking around with a bat is not an abnormal thing. Happens every day. But we'll see how this develops. And of course, wish her the best if she is having any kind of significant emotional problems. I've always felt very sympathetic for those who are mentally ill and chemically addicted when I was prosecutor. But let's switch gears now to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, the famous basketball player. His son has been charged with stabbing a neighbor over a dispute about, of all things, trash cans. Guys, any thoughts about that and where it's going? He's under arrest. It's a serious charge.
Yeah, I mean, I admit to being the one who watched him on Family Feud because I love Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And so it's really sad to see this happening. Sounds like the victim in the case is 60 years old. Apparently they had some altercation. Obviously, the defendant's position is that he was attacked first. I'm not sure what the evidence is going to reveal, but at the end of the day, the victim was in fact stabbed and sustained serious injuries. And so, like anytime we talk about these things, we don't know everything. I think time will tell what the evidence actually is and whether or not he does in fact have a defense.
Yes, and Bernarda, very quickly, Julie makes good points. We don't know if it's a defense or not, but let's talk about how many crazy cases happen over road rage, trash cans, neighbors, disputes that turn really, really ugly. People just blow up and bad things happen. You see it all the time in the system.
Oh, of course, especially over parking spaces, especially here in New York. I mean, driving around, you can get upset when someone takes your parking space since it's so hard to find. But the thing is that you never know what's going on in someone's mind. You don't know what they've been through that day or what just happened before you encountered them. So you don't know what is it that ticked them off. Because obviously, from what we do know is that the victim was the person that started this confrontation.
Agreed completely. Listen, guys, you were awesome. It was great having you on. Unfortunately, the show has to end. Stay tuned for our regularly scheduled program. You can find me at Bianchi ESQ on Twitter, Instagram. Have a great day.